It's the Ostrom Avenue podcast, and it starts right now.
Welcome into the Ostrom Avenue podcast. AJ Myers, joined alongside Griffin Bloomstein. No Jordan this week. Jordan is kind of traveling the world in my eyes. He was in Miami last night when Syracuse men's basketball took on the Hurricanes, and now he's in California for the women's games. Syracuse women's basketball doing a little West Coast trip, similar to what the men's team did against Stanford and Cal. So, Griffin, no Jordan this week. What are we going to do?
I'm not sure. So we've done this before. We can figure it out. I'm not sure. Like, do I talk about the weather? Do I mention that I had Chipotle yesterday? Like,
that's a big deal. That's a big deal. What was your bowl?
Chicken. I've long been a brown rice guy.
I can't tell the difference. White or brown, I can't tell.
That's what I was trying to figure out. So yesterday I got white rice. Did it make a difference? Not really. But it tasted good. Chicken, black beans. I'm a big corn guy. I think corn at Chipotle might be like their most underrated thing on the menu. Pico, cheese, sour cream.
The corn is a fair point. I wasn't a corn person on my bowl, but I did get it. Like I've gotten it's been a little while, but now I consistently get it. Yep. Do you get the guac? Do you get guacamole?
I do.
On the bowl or on the side?
See, this is another thing where I go back and forth. I don't know which one's better.
I think it's better on the bowl.
See, I agree. But then, I don't know. Sometimes I like to order guac on the side. And so, I get my chips, and then eventually I'll, be full enough from the bowl that I leave my chips and guac. Like, I put the guac in the fridge.
Yeah, that's good.
I put the chips down and, eat it the next day or, have it, later in the day.
Yeah.
So, it depends on how I'm feeling, honestly.
It's crazy. I've done the podcast with Jordan for over a year, and Jordan is the Chipotle guy, and we've never had this conversation. So,
well,
assuming Jordan's on next week, we are going to have this conversation, I think.
We might have to.
The weather right now in Syracuse is miserable. It's snowed about every
Awful.
day. It's snowing right now as we're recording, so not much to touch on there. But one thing with Jordan is I think we need the Kurt Herbstreit, around the map when on Twitter. I think we need that because, he is racking up some miles this week from Syracuse to Florida and now out to California.
Yeah, I have a class with Jordan, and it's the only class he's taking this semester. I swear he's missed half of the classes.
Well, he is a senior, and he's deserved these road trips, and I'm sure he's having a great time, and I'm sure he'll listen to this episode.
But it's also making the Ostrom picks hard. He's exempt. How are we supposed to catch up?
Yeah. Now, last night did not help us. We're recording this on Wednesday. Me and Griffin, we thought we would pick Syracuse. The line was weird, Griffin.
I don't know how
weird. Vegas knew something because I was shocked that Miami was favored.
Yeah, well, they proved us wrong.
Yeah.
Because we both picked Syracuse.
Yep, we both went 0-3. We both picked the under. Did not expect this to be an offensive explosion. Miami, one-win ACC team. Miami beat Syracuse 91-84. This is about as low can get for Syracuse.
Yeah, I just didn't think they played with much hustle on the defensive side of the ball. No, you can't allow 91 points to the worst team in the ACC. My mom texted me after this game and was like, all right, close loss. At least they kept it close. And I texted her back. I was like, this is the worst team in the conference. And she was like, oh, I didn't realize it. Because that's not how Miami played. The way, if you look at Miami, them playing against Syracuse, it looked like they were one of the best teams in the ACC. Matthew Cleveland couldn't miss a shot. That guy looked like Superman out there. Syracuse didn't have an answer defensively, and it's just the same old thing from Adrian Autry after the game. It's just defense didn't really show up. Not much else.
Yeah, and the reason Miami looked like such a good team is because Syracuse defense was atrocious. The Hurricanes, they were an awful three-point shooting team all season. They hit 10 threes last night, and I think 8 of those were uncontested. Syracuse could not close out anything. They made every basket look so simple for Miami, and that's all Adrian Autry had to say. It was a really distraught Autry at the postgame press conference. He essentially said, we played one side of the ball, and they did. They scored 84 points. They made 8 threes, which for SU, that's pretty impressive. Now, they did take 21 of those, so a lot didn't go in. But offensively, they got up to 84 points. It was a two-man show with Starling and Lampkin. I thought Starling did have a great game. He shot 8 of 21 from the field. He made just 1 3-pointer. he got 25 points, but I think a few of those were just kind of filler baskets at the end. Lampkin, I did think, played a really nice game, but defensively, it was an atrocious performance. Lucas Taylor, who had been probably SU's best defensive option all season, had an awful game. I mean, you would have thought Matthew Cleveland was LeBron James, the way he was playing, and Lucas Taylor just had no answer for him all day. And Jaquan Carlos, I mean, I was on the double overtime, and right when the game was ending, Carlos knocked a few big threes down and made it close. And I was like, oh wow, like this is gonna completely change the storyline of this game. It'll be that Jaquan Carlos turns it around and SU comes away with a win. It didn't happen. He was really bad in the first half, especially defensively. He's such a defensive reliability, and again, he's supposed to be the point guard. He only gets 3 assists. Eddie Lampkin had the most assists on this roster last night with 6. So I think that just shows the problems this team has.
Yeah, it's just tough because you have Syracuse's wings, Elijah Moore, Lucas Taylor, Chris Bell. They're so like there's no consistency whatsoever there. Defensively, shooting the three ball. I mean, Lucas Taylor played 19 minutes because he picked up 4 fouls. I mean, he's supposed to be the best wing on this team defensively, and you can't pick up 4 early fouls and then only play 19 minutes. Chris Bell, I thought he had one of his better performances. He knocked down a 3 early, and it's just like, okay, is he going to go 1 for 6 or is he going to go 2 for 5? There's not because nothing else happens for Chris Bell that much. 14 points. It was a good Chris Bell game, but in the end, a loss is a loss. Elijah Moore, who's coming off one of his best starts of the season against Boston College, where he knocked down 3 threes in the first half and then only played less than 15 minutes.
Apparently it was an injury. I don't know if he's still dealing with that, supposed injury.
Played 11 minutes, started this game. So
yep.
Yeah, it's 0 points, 0 assists, 0 rebounds, 0 blocks, 0 steals. Didn't make a shot. A lot of zeros in that stack.
Yeah, a lot of zeros around the board for Syracuse. And I thought Chris Bell, this game summarized the season. First half, he had 12 points, catch and shoot. He was knocking down the 3, and you kind of thought, like, here we go. This is a Chris Bell kind of game. Maybe he gets 20 points tonight and the Orange come away with a win. In the second half, he gets 2 points. He was lifeless in the second half. And I question, maybe Autry should have put him in at the start of that second half. Would that have made a difference? I have no idea. Chris Bell could have, still went scoreless for most of the second half if he started. I just think it's just been such an up and down year for Bell. But I definitely think, especially after this loss, Griffin, there's a lot of people that are really starting. And they weren't, me included. I wasn't putting a lot of blame on Autry at the start of the season. I thought it was more the players' fault. But unfortunately, with a loss like this, I mean, the coach is going to be, front page of the blame.
Yeah, and it just makes you think. So you go back to those first 3 games, and I mean, triple overtime against Youngstown State, barely
foreshadowing,
beating Lemoyne by 4 points. You beat Lemoyne, and then you only beat Colgate by 2. I know Syracuse has had struggles with Colgate, but still, you look at those first 3 games, and it's like, whoa, like we should have seen this coming. Like, how do we like? And then like they kept it close with Texas. It's just looking back right now, I'm just like, wow, I should have seen this coming. Syracuse was not the team that people thought it was going to be. I mean, you bring in the 5-star freshman, supposed to be the best guy since Melo, Eddie Lampkin. I mean, I can't put much blame on Eddie Lampkin.
No, he's done everything he can.
He averaged 10 points and 7 rebounds with Colorado last season, took them to the NCAA tournament. Obviously, he wasn't the main guy on that team. But this season, he's probably been all that and more from what he did last year. So you can't put much of this blame on Eddie Lampkin. And then you look around and it's like, okay, what are you going to do? I mean, last season, 20 wins. First year under Adrian Autry, I mean, that's as good as you can get. There was a lot of problems with that team on and off the court. A lot of drama. Benny got kicked off. There were some other things going on. And it's just like, okay, I gave him that year. You were in bubble contention for the tournament for most of the season. That would count that as a win, 20 wins. Then this season, all right, you got your guys. You're going to do something. You hit the portal hard. You brought in the 5-star freshman. You brought in the Brooklyn kid, Elijah Moore, who can shoot ridiculously. Scored 90 points in a high school game. All right, so what happens? You start flat, and then it only gets worse. I mean, losing to the worst team in the ACC, that's unacceptable. And so it brings out a lot of questions.
It does. And I think, it is time to look at next season. And there still is a lot to play for. And this year in college basketball, I know Jordan's talked about this, and it's impossible to disagree. There is no such thing as a rebuild. You can't rebuild in college athletics. This is not a thing. But if the Syracuse fails to win out, Autry will have what is the worst record for the Orange that Boeheim set a few years ago, right before he left. So that'll be a big thing that John Wildhack will have to think about is if Autry is the guy, because I'm looking at the football side. He found a gem in Fran Brown, and he delivered right away. Autry that first season, everyone said, yeah, he did deliver. 20 wins. A lot happened that first year, as you harped on. But this year's been a massive disappointment, and this was supposed to be his year. These were his guys. I definitely think he needs to reassess how he approaches the transfer portal because I think he will be here. I don't think there's anyone else you could go out and say, yep, this is better than Autry, because I just think it's too much turbulence letting go of a coach who you just put in charge two seasons ago.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, AJ. I think Adrian Autry deserves another year here. I think it's just two different scenarios. College, I mean, the courts are about to rule on the revenue sharing
which is a big deal.
policy. $20 million potentially being shared from the athletics department and the university to the athletes. Now, a lot of that will go to football, but a portion of it will go to basketball. And so that makes the difference. How does that fit in with the transfer portal? Syracuse is going to need a center in the transfer portal next season.
Point guard as well.
A point guard as well. Kyan Anthony and Sadiq White, two big-time freshmen coming into next year's class. Obviously, those guys are gonna earn some money, just to put it frankly. Luke Fennell and Aaron Womack, the other two guys going in. Syracuse has four guys. I mean, AJ, if you're a college basketball recruit and the coach that recruited you personally to a school got fired, is that changing your decision?
Yeah, I mean that's what you have to consider, and that's why I just think it's impossible for Autry to be let go or anything of that nature happening because he was the reason Boeheim I think trusted him so much with this job was his ability to recruit, and that's something that Boeheim said I couldn't do it anymore. It was too hard to recruit, and Autry everyone says he owns the DMV area. He was the guy that helped get all those guys from the Maryland area for those great Boeheim teams, and I'm definitely played a factor in getting, I think he played a huge factor in getting Donnie Freeman to Syracuse. So he can recruit. It's just more whether or not he can get the X's and O's right. But I even look at this Miami game. I wouldn't say there was something like, what was Autry thinking? Like, you got to make that substitution. I brought up the Bell thing, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that would have made a difference if he started the second half because Chris Bell's been so inconsistent this year. And I don't think if you would have told Autry that Chris Bell would be coming off the bench in February at the start of the year, he would have been like, "What?"
Would have called you nuts.
Was supposed to be that knockdown 3-point shooter this year, and he's been anything but that. So I just think there's not enough reasoning to let go of Autry. I understand it's been an awful year. This team is fighting to make the ACC tournament. That's not how it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be they're fighting to make the NCAA tournament. It hasn't been the case, but I think yes, he needs to reassess how he approaches the transfer portal. Because I think that's the biggest reason why this has been such a disappointing year is because those guys, he's just missed on too many guys in the portal. He's hit on one, Lampkin. I think Jaquan Carlos, Lucas Taylor, they haven't delivered.
No. And it makes you look back because, one of the things in Syracuse this offseason, they brought in Dan Engelstad to essentially take Adrian Autry's job as the number 2. And one of the big promises with Dan Engelstad is, okay, he was bringing in his star player, Dakota LeFew, into the transfer portal. Was LeFew going to follow him to Syracuse? And that was very rumored. He took a visit, but he didn't happen. He went to Georgia. And it's just like, okay, like you're kind of, I'm obviously not promised this guy, but one of the benefits of bringing in Dan Engelstad is one, he had head coaching experience at Mount St. Mary's, but also he could have brought over some players and he didn't. And so I think another angle with that is, okay, Adrian Autry was the number 2 to Boeheim for the final years after Coach Hopkins left to Washington. And what's up with that number 2? The number 2 is that's the coach that a lot of the players go to when they're mad about the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like, okay, but you're not the number 2. The players aren't going to you anymore. How do you become the number 1, the head man, the leader that the players look up to? And it's a whole different scenario. And, I think Syracuse, I'm going to bring in a Boston analogy here. It's kind of similar to went on with the Patriots. I mean, Jerron Mayo was the understudy to Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick left. Jerron Mayo filled his shoes, and that was the plan. And the plan with Jim Boeheim left, and the plan was Adrian Autry after Coach Hopkins left in 2017 to Washington. Adrian Autry was the plan, and year one went great, but year two was shaky. And so it's just like, okay, now Syracuse is put in a bad spot. Like, do they abandon their guy? I mean, Adrian Autry, he was a Syracuse legend. He dedicated years coaching as an assistant coach. And now head coach year two hasn't gone too well. But year one went pretty well. You give him that third year. And so it's hard. I mean, Patriots, they fired Jerron Mayo. There's a lot of tough decisions in the world of college basketball, but I think he deserves another year. I think you just got to ride it out one more year, see what happens. And what's good about the world of college basketball is that everything moves quickly. And I love the transfer portal. I love the offseason recruiting aspect of it. And so it moves quickly. I mean, come March, April, the future of Syracuse basketball will be known. Like, there will be transfers in the portal. There will be, whether it's coaches here, coaches there, fired. I mean, that's what's good about college basketball. It moves so quickly. And so, I mean, you have people throwing out names already on Twitter in the double overtime, whether it's Jerry McNamara or Matt Langle
Love
from
that one.
Colgate, or whether it's Coach Hopkins, bring him back. I mean, there's so many names. And so it's going to be a tough decision for John Wildhack and his team to figure out what he wants to do. But I think you and I both agree Coach Autry deserves another year.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he was moved off after this season, just because what he did in his first year. And again, there's so much risk of moving off a coach with all those, highly touted recruits that, are supposed to bring Syracuse back to the promised land and do good things for this team. The next game for the Orange is not anything any easier. They got North Carolina at home on Saturday. The Tar Heels, they're struggling, Griffin. They're going to be a desperate North Carolina side. How do you think the Orange match up there?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, obviously we remember what happened last season.
Yeah, a lot of
UNC
look at
came
Miami too, the buzzer beater. Two
I know.
things that probably won't happen this year.
And it's crazy because Miami is a much worse team.
Yep.
And North Carolina is a much
Yep.
worse team. And you're like, okay, well, Syracuse would be lucky to get one win against either of these two teams. I mean, we're also in the new age of the ACC. Jim Larinaga retired. UNC doesn't have its legendary coach either. And so what happens? I think North Carolina has much more talent than Syracuse at this current moment, and I think it will show on Saturday. And I'm worried that this team, that Syracuse is going to stop fighting altogether. I mean, against Miami, maybe they weren't fighting on defense, but they showed fight on the offensive side. Eddie Lampkin seemed like he wanted to score as many points as he could get. And same with J.J. Starling. So I'm just worried, hopefully this doesn't happen, that Syracuse stops fighting altogether.
Definitely. It'll be an interesting game. I think it's going to be an interesting reception from that dome crowd is how much people are actually there and still invested, because I do think there's a lot of people that think the players on this team are not invested anymore. So it'll be an interesting game against the Tar Heels. Syracuse women's basketball, meanwhile, though, they're out west doing what I said at the top of the show, doing what the men's team did earlier this season. They got Stanford, and then they got Cal. That's where our good friend Jordan Leonard is right now. Griffin, what are your expectations for this women's team on this little West Coast trip?
Yeah, I would like them to carry the momentum they've had from the previous 5 games, 3-2, 2 road wins, and then playing some good teams tight like NC State. So it's going to be a tough trip. It's going to test Coach Jack and her squad on how well they can play through adversity. It's definitely not easy to play on the West Coast. 10 p.m. tip. That's math is correct. 1 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, 1 a.m. Yeah, 1 a.m. Eastern.
No. It's 10 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
But still, whatever the time, I don't. Our friend of the program, Sam Reese, is better at time than both of us.
Get in contact with him.
And so it's going to be tough. But, I mean, Syracuse has been playing well. Sophie Burrows has been electric. And so if they can ride this momentum through the next couple of games, the ACC is a gauntlet. And so I'll be excited to see how they do.
ACC women's basketball conference, anything different than what the men's team is. In the women's, they have 6 teams that are ranked. And Stanford, they're struggling. They're a game under 500. But Cal, they are 19-6. So that will definitely be a test for Coach Jack's team. A player that I've been really impressed with, and you mentioned her name, Sophie Burrows. I thought she's really played some really nice games as of late. She had 28 points against Virginia Tech. She tagged on another 15 in that comeback win against Wake Forest on Sunday in the Dome. I think her unlocking her game has really helped. Offensive game has really helped this side.
Yeah. I mean, when Syracuse has the paint presence of Kyra Wood and Isabel Vergel, and then you can kick it out to Sophie Burrows and she's making 4 or 5 threes a night, there's nothing better. I mean, to have a nearly 40% three-point shooter on your roster, I mean, that's just different levels. And she's also a 6'2" guard. I mean, that's not something you see. So dynamic, such a good player. And she's a difference maker. Syracuse women's basketball, another team that Coach Jack said they're in a rebuild.
Yeah.
We don't like to say those terms for college sports in general, but I mean, she used it. So she's definitely a cornerstone building block for if Coach Jack's going to hit the portal or go to recruiting. Hey, Syracuse has Sophie Burrows. She's going to be stable for the next 2 seasons. She'll knock down some threes, and I think a lot of people are going to want to play with her.
Definitely. And looking ahead for this team, they got Stanford on Thursday. We're recording this Wednesday at 10 p.m., so you're going to have to stay up late for that one. And then Cal is 6 p.m. on Sunday, so a little bit earlier to start here on the East Coast. And then after that, you mentioned it, number 12, North Carolina, and then away at number 13, Duke. So those are 2 really tough tests for FLJ's group. Be interesting to see how that team performs. Griffin, a team that's been performing really well, off to a 3-0 start. The Syracuse men's lacrosse basketball has not really gone the way on the hill this year for Syracuse, but lacrosse, especially for the men's side, looks to be in good hands. Gary Gates gotten off to a perfect start. I thought Townsend, they looked pretty comfortable. They took care of business. A little bit of a slower start, but again, it was a complete game, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, this team is so fun to watch. I mean, after the football season, rather, I mean, Syracuse fans were just ready. They were ready for a good basketball team, and then when that didn't happen, they were so looking forward to this lacrosse team
Yes.
because this lacrosse team is the real deal. If anyone listening is not watching Syracuse lacrosse, they're doing something wrong because Syracuse men's lacrosse is I think the best team on campus, and I think the best team in the nation. I mean, the offense so electric. Joey Spallina, right up there with the best player in the country. And then they have Owen Hiltz, Michael Leo, Luke Roa, Finn Thompson, Trey Deer, Jackson Birtwhistle, Sam English. There's so many names on this team that can score, and they're so fun to watch. They will entertain you while playing lacrosse. I mean, and that's to a level that other teams in the country just don't have. And then John Mullen, the faceoff X. He put up a show against Towson. I mean, Syracuse, they're the team to beat right now in my eyes in Division One lacrosse. And I mean, it's going to be fun seeing them face a top 10 team on Saturday against Maryland.
Maryland is number 6 in the country, and this always bothered me with lacrosse because Ivy League play has not started yet. So all the Ivy League teams they're ranked. Cornell's the 3rd best team in the league in the country, but they've yet to play a game, and so too is Notre Dame. Notre Dame's 1st in the country, but they haven't played yet. Meanwhile, Syracuse has played 3 games, and it's like this like the whole season. There's always an odd number of games certain teams have played. So I think you saying they are the best team in the country is a fair argument because the actual best team in the country, Notre Dame, is yet to play a single game. Going back to Maryland, though, they've gotten off to not as comfortable as a start. They beat Richmond 12-7, but then at Loyola, they were really tested. It was just an 8-7 victory. I think that says it all that Maryland, they're going to have their hands full against Gary Gates' group.
Yeah, that game went down to the wire. A goal with like 5 seconds left, forced overtime, and I honestly thought Maryland was going to lose. And that's how good Loyola was playing. Loyola had a 5-2 lead in the 3rd quarter. I mean, I don't think Maryland's a sneaky good team. Terry Foy said it when he came on. He's like, you never know what you're going to get from Maryland.
Tim Leonard.
They can get Tim Leonard at it.
He echoed a similar message that Maryland can really be the biggest threat in all of Syracuse, in all of lacrosse, because that's what they did last year. They kind of snuck into the Final Four late there.
Yeah, and so you don't know what you're going to get from them. They'll definitely play up to competition, and especially on the road, Syracuse is going to have to make sure it's dialed in. And I'm confident with the Gary Gate leading the way that Syracuse will be prepped and ready on Saturday to play Maryland. I mean, but just you have to go back to that Towson game one second. Like the Towson was good. They were a ranked team. They played Syracuse good for the first 3 quarters.
Yep.
And then some flip switched. I don't know what Gary Gates said after that third quarter. He must have fired the guys up. It was a 7-0 fourth quarter. I mean, that's just dominance.
That attack too. I mean, there's so many. It's not just Joey Spleen. There's so many guys. Owen Hiltz, Michael Leo, so many more that can make an impact. And I want to go. You want to go back to Townsend? I want to go back to Maryland last year. I just remember how heartbreaking of a game that was. It was 13-12 in overtime. That was one where like, oh, Gary Gate group should have had it, and there was still a lot of pressure on Gary Gate because he hadn't had those big wins yet. And I think that was one where it was like they should have won. I think that was kind of a measuring stick. Maybe this isn't the year yet. Now you got Maryland, you got them on the road. Prove, just like you were supposed to prove in the first 3 games, that they were supposed to be comfortable wins because you're that good. Now prove against a top 10 team that you're legit, that you deserve to be the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, it'll say a lot because the road doesn't get any easier from there. You have another ranked team in Harvard, then you go out west to Utah, then you come back and play a top 5 Hopkins team. Lacrosse, what's fun about lacrosse is you see the best teams play week after week. And so Syracuse is going to be tested early. They're going to be tested often. And you're going to see whether Syracuse can hang with the best of the best. And I'm looking forward to it. The team is so fun to watch every time. It's just I put a smile on my face because after a rough basketball season, I'm ready for a very good team on the hill. And Syracuse men's lacrosse is certainly giving me it.
Men's lacrosse, not the only side going up against Maryland. Last game we got to touch on is Syracuse women's lacrosse. They also play Maryland in College Park, so both men's and women's teams, they'll be in Maryland this weekend. This one's at 11 a.m., and Terrapin's not ranked, unlike the men's team, but it'll still be a good test for Syracuse women's lacrosse.
Yeah, obviously, power conference team you can never overlook, and we had a lot of questions about this Syracuse lacrosse team coming into the season. You didn't know what they were going to give you. I mean, so many people leaving after last season. First, the goalkeeper, Daniela Gayet. How is she going to do in her first start? And holding UAlbany to 9 goals, okay. I think obviously you'd probably like that number to be a little less, but in the first quarter it was dominance. 8-2, halftime, 15-4. I mean, that's the kind of things that you like to see if you're Syracuse and Kayla Trainer. Olivia Adamson, 3 goals, 3 assists. She's going to be that leader. She's going to step up. She showed it. Emma Muchnick, another player you're going to rely on the attack, and she had 3 goals as well. So I think it's going to be a learning curve at the start of the season. Just a lot of new pieces on this team. How do they gel? Does it work? Does it do it quickly? Do they take a little bit longer to find their rhythm? And so after a very strong start in the first half against UAlbany, hopefully they back it up on the road against Maryland.
I think that UAlbany game was really telling on the offensive side. Olivia Adamson and Emma Ward, they combined for 11 points. I think that's going to be the story of the season. If this team's going to win games, both of those players are going to need to be racking up the goals and assists because there's a lot of young players on that team that both Ward and Adamson will definitely need to lead. Griffin, it's a busy, busy time. What are your expectations for all 4 of these games? Not each one, but what are your expectations for the weekend for Syracuse?
Hopefully they keep me busy. I'm excited to watch a lot of Syracuse sports. There is some stat, but before the basketball game yesterday, Syracuse was like 15-0 and they're since like Thursday and across all sports on the hill. And so
there you go. That's pretty impressive.
If Syracuse can pull away with 3 out of the 4 wins, I would be happy.
Get your notepad ready here. So we got Syracuse men's lacrosse, our first broadcast on WAR Saturday, the second best team in the country. Gary Gates' group goes up against number 6 Maryland. That game starts at 2 p.m. McClure Modeling countdown to face off is at 1:30. The double overtime will take you all the way up to 5:30, which is really convenient because then at 5:30, you got the men's basketball team. They got North Carolina at home in the Dome. McClure Modeling countdown to tip off right after the double overtime. You don't even have to touch your dial. Don't go anywhere because WAR Sports will be on the air throughout the day on Saturday. That's at 5:30. Game at 6. Double overtime will take you up till 10 p.m. It's an exciting time on the hill for the lacrosse teams. Both of these basketball teams trying to work out some kinks and trying to get into those postseason positions. That's all me and Griffin got this week on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Be sure to stay tuned for next week's episode.